Caregiving and burnout go hand in hand. Oftentimes, we hear workshop titles from panel experts to help family caregivers with headlines like How to Avoid Burnout or Learn Techniques to Eliminate Burnout for Caregivers. As a family caregiver, is burnout truly something that you can avoid? These trainings assume that burnout is similar to weight gain and you could just exercise off the excess weight, but that could not be furthest from the truth. Real burnout for family caregivers is a continuous, profound state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion that arises from the constant demands of having to provide care, often leading to feelings of being overwhelmed, feeling isolated, and sometimes even inadequate. Family caregivers may experience chronic stress, fatigue, and a diminished sense of personal fulfillment as they prioritize the needs of others while, unfortunately, neglecting their own well being. This makes it crucial to recognize and address the needs of support and also self care. Unfortunately, burnout comes with the territory of family caregiving. It's not about eliminating burnout, it's actually about learning how to manage through it. Today, we will talk about just that. Hi, I'm Shari Bailey. I'm a parent, but also a caregiver. Today, we are going to bust through the stigma that burnout is avoidable, and instead, we will talk about how burnout is a common result of caregiving. I'm joined today by Michael Nash. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Sherry.
So let's start with your definition of burnout.
Okay, let me start by saying I'm not a doctor. So, this is my personal definition of burnout based on my experiences as also a parent caregiver. Burnout to me is when you get to the point where you're physically, emotionally, and just mentally done. Like there's no more gas in your tank. You can't go 1 inch further, no matter how hard you try, no matter what type of effort you put towards it. So to me, that's how I define burnout. When you get to the point where physically, mentally, and emotionally, you just don't have anything else to give.
Yeah, and that is so common. I mean, we can talk about our personal experience, but there are so many other experiences that can be talked about. But let's bring it to our experience with Layla. From the moment Layla wakes up to the moment she goes to sleep,
Yeah.
it is constant care because she is nonverbal. So it's recognizing the cues of when she needs something. It's changing her diaper, and she weighs like a 9 or 10 year
Yeah.
old would should weigh, and it's feeding her through the feeding tube. It's giving her medication. It's giving her the attention that she needs. I mean, the list is endless, and when you deal with that day in and day out, on top of just living and
Yeah.
being a human with work and school and everything else most
Mhm.
people have going on, it's exhausting.
Yeah, it is. It is. And by no way are we trying to minimize what a parent of a quote unquote normally,
Traditional,
traditionally, normal functioning child
yeah.
goes through. Because as a parent, and again, I've been a parent of two growing adult boys right now, and I've also been a parent of a special needs child along with a twin sister. So there are things that are involved that you face as a caregiver of a loved one, of a child, of a parent that you may not normally face in your normal everyday life. And it is exhausting
It
because
is.
although she's totally dependent, she has her own personality. So you have to add that on top of you want her to move around, you want her to do things, but at the same time, you have to protect her so she doesn't hurt herself. So
Exactly.
it becomes physically, emotionally, and mentally, it's a drain.
It is a drain, and it's always something new,
Hmm.
and you're always on your toes to
Yeah.
figure out what could it be today.
Hmm.
I'll give the example that happened 2 Christmases ago. I
Hmm.
remember we were in the living room and we were preparing for Christmas morning breakfast. And Layla just seemed very off, and we didn't know what was going on. And we had seen signs of it the day before, but it was the holiday, and we said, okay, let's just monitor, see if she
Hmm.
has a fever. And everything seemed okay
Hmm.
from that perspective. And then all of a sudden, she just started seizuring for the
Hmm.
first time.
Hmm.
And I lost it.
Yeah.
I thought I lost Layla that
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
And I remember, you jumped in, we helped out, and we
Hmm.
called the cops. The EMT came, and she was in ICU for about 3 days
Hmm.
at Johns Hopkins. And that is an example how things just turn
Yeah.
at a drop of a dime for
Hmm.
caregivers
Hmm.
every single day. It's unpredictable.
Yeah.
And like you said, I think life is unpredictable for everyone.
Hmm.
But when it comes to your children or
Yeah.
adults that you're caring for,
Hmm.
you don't know what to
Yeah.
expect. And I think that's the emotional draining part that
Yeah.
causes some of the burnout.
Yeah. 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 I would agree with that. Like you said, you don't know what to expect. And again, in life, you don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
But I think what happens is it's almost like that X factor that in the back of your brain you have been conditioned after caring for, and again, we're talking about Layla at this point, a child who has a rare condition that anything could happen at
Anything can
any
happen.
given time,
Yeah.
and then put on top of that you also have another child that also needs love, also needs nurturing, also needs attention. So again, this I won't call it a myth, but this notion
Mm-hmm.
that you can avoid burnout when being a family caregiver, it's a little baffling when you think about it.
It really is. It comes with the job
Yeah.
description. Like I think
Hmm.
about any job, how it says special duties as
Yeah.
assigned, that last
Hmm.
bullet point. With caregiving, it's burnout is inevitable. And
Yes.
it's not so much about eliminating burnout
Hmm.
because that is not a
Yeah.
possibility.
Yeah.
But it's okay to acknowledge that burnout is part of the
Yeah.
role.
Yeah.
And it's important to know how to manage
Hmm.
through burnout.
Yeah. And I think that's the key. The key word is manage, right? Um, Again, like we've mentioned, it's almost inevitable
Yeah.
that it's going to happen at one time or another in your life, whether it be physically, if you have a 12-year-old child that doesn't walk, doesn't talk, can't do anything on their own, but you have to treat them like a newborn baby. That's physically draining on your
It's
body,
physically draining.
whether
Yeah.
it's the mental aspect, whether it's the emotional aspect,
The
because
financial. Let's
the
not forget
financial
about the
aspect,
financial
we are
burnout.
living, breathing beings,
Yes.
and all these things, that's real life,
It's real life.
So I think if you look at it from that point of view, I'm not trying to eliminate it. I have accepted and acknowledged that it is a part of my life, right? What can I do to manage it? That's the key.
Good question. And if if you were to ask me
Hmm.
in my personal journey, the first step is acknowledging that it's okay.
Yes.
There's so much shame behind the idea of expressing that you're burnt out.
Yeah.
But the first step is really being transparent
Yeah.
enough to be okay to say, I am burnt out
And I need a break.
and I need a break.
Yeah.
And that is nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah. I
I
agree.
can't tell you how many families that I've spoken with where they will tell me, I'm so exhausted, but I can't ask so and so for help because, they won't understand, or
Hmm.
I'm so exhausted, I feel burnt out, but I'm a mom or I'm
Yeah.
a dad and
Yeah.
I should not feel like this. What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
There's zero wrong with you. I'm looking
Yeah.
at the camera. Zero is wrong with you.
Yeah.
Burnout comes with the territory.
Hmm. Hmm.
I have my makeup on, my hair is done, I'm dressed up,
Hmm.
but when I'm home, this is not the usual
Yeah.
look.
Yeah.
The usual look is hair in a bun,
Yeah.
no
Yeah. Yeah.
makeup,
Hmm.
running around with,
Hmm.
milk on my t-shirt or what
Hmm.
have you,
Yeah.
from just being in the day-to-day
Yeah.
of caring for our loved ones.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, in our household, we get our hands dirty,
We get our hands dirty.
and
Yeah.
Layla, although Layla's nonverbal, she communicates in her own way. So that's a whole nother piece to the puzzle where, she'll get to the point where she gets frustrated because you don't understand what she's trying to tell you. So we've kind of learned, and I think we do a good job.
Mhm.
Well, understanding through her communication, she makes sounds. She doesn't talk, but through her communication of what she needs.
Yeah.
That is mentally
It's like
it's
you have
tasking.
to
Yeah, you
encrypt.
have to.
It's almost
Yeah,
encrypting
yeah,
every day
yeah.
to understand what the message is. And that itself will
Hmm.
drain you,
Yeah.
right? But I'll also say on the flip side, I know a lot of families that have verbal children that
Hmm.
have special needs.
Hmm.
And there's a challenge with that as
Yep.
well, because it could be that they're communicating, but maybe over communicating, under
Hmm.
communicating,
Hmm.
saying not a lot of words, saying
Yeah.
too many words. And I mean, it could be very challenging from the other side of the
Yeah.
spectrum as well.
Yeah.
Um, Burnout, you mentioned in a conversation we had a few days ago about this, you said something very interesting, and you
Hmm.
said burnout symptoms are very similar to depression symptoms.
So true. So
Can you
true.
talk about that for a
Yeah.
second?
In today's society, we deal with depression, and it has so many different faces, right? And what I've noticed as we go through this journey with Layla, and we're learning every day, right? Um, it's very similar to the characteristics of being depressed.
Yeah.
You're always tired, no matter how much rest you get. You can't. You almost lose motivation to do anything. I
Yeah.
mean, basic things: eating, showering. You know, combing your hair. Like me, I have a bald head, but that takes work.
Effort.
Like
Yeah.
it takes work to keep this thing nice and shiny. So when you get to that point where you're burnt out, what I've noticed is it's very similar to being depressed. And I don't want to sit here and say that is a form of depression, but when you get to the point where you can't conjure up enough energy, physical energy, to pick yourself out of the bed and take a shower, 9 times out of 10, if you're not dealing with depression, you're burnt out. Burnout is real.
Burnout is
It's
so
it's it's
real.
such a real thing, and I think again, to bring it back, the key is to recognize it, to acknowledge it, and then come up with some type of plan or strategy. How do I deal with this when I come across this?
Yeah.
Because the reality of it is, you can have burnout, but when you're a caregiver, you cannot live in that space.
You cannot. You
You have
have
to
too much
you have too much
on
riding
your
on it.
plate.
You have too
Yes.
many people riding, depending on you. So you have to try not to live in that space. So, what we've tried to do is, we tag team. How do we deal with burnout? Sometimes Sherry's burned out and I'm okay. Sometimes I'm burned out and she's okay. Everybody doesn't have that privilege. So we're really just trying to tap into, once you acknowledge it, once you recognize it,
Yeah.
acknowledge it, what do I do?
What do I do? Before we get into how to manage it,
Hmm.
let's maybe point out three things in
Okay.
terms of how to identify burnout. So, whether that's independently, right?
Hmm.
How do I self identify
Okay.
burnout? Or how can others outside of the household
Hmm.
help individuals by first identifying that they are truly burnt out?
Hmm.
So, what would be the first thing for you?
I think with me, how I recognize, and I'll use you as an example. The way that I recognize when Sherry's burnt out is Sherry's normally a bubbly person. She's always on the go. She's always moving. She's always doing something. When I start to see the her behavior shift, like she doesn't want to go outside, and she's an outside person. She's a sun person. She has to have the
Yes.
sun, to the point where
Solar
it's like
powered,
she's
I call
solar
it.
powered, where she can't even. It's almost like she can't even function if she doesn't get some type of sunlight. When she gets to the point, you want to go outside, you want to go for a walk, and she's like, "Nah, I don't really feel like it. I'm tired." Or she can get a full night's sleep, and within 20 minutes, she's like, "Oh, I'm just so tired," because she's usually an upbeat type of person. That's how I identify it. You're tired for not no reason, but it's not your norm,
It's not your norm.
right?
That's a good one.
It's not your norm, and when you start to see things that are not people norm, Sherry likes to go out and you want to go to dinner, but it's like, really, what do you want to eat? I don't know,
Yeah.
and I'm a chef, so I can cook anything. So when she gets to the point, she's like, yeah, I don't know. I was like, you know what? We need to shake this up a little bit.
That's a good one. I think for me, it would be being easily triggered,
That was
right?
my next one.
That
Yeah,
that that is a
yeah,
that is a clear sign
yeah.
of burnout when whether you see someone easily triggered or you feel easily
Hmm.
triggered by
Hmm.
just the smallest
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
It could be that Layla's watching Mickey Mouse and I'm working on my laptop and she decides to laugh really loud on a
Mm-hmm.
certain part
Mm-hmm.
when I'm on a Zoom call,
Mm-hmm.
as an example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And something like that is a
Yeah.
joyous moment
Yeah.
typically. But when you're burnt out, it could be something that small that just makes you feel down.
Yeah. And I think what it is your mental tank is empty.
Is empty and you can't appreciate the small things
Yeah.
anymore. You have gotten to the point where you're on the edge.
Yep. Yep. And again, you're almost like a time bomb.
Yeah.
And so when your
Time bomb.
yeah, when
Yeah.
your mental tank is empty, you have no mental capacity of the small things that normally don't bother you. Now they just like it's everything. The Amazon was supposed to order. The truck's late. Mike, we were supposed to go to dinner, but I'm running late, so I can't get. It's the little things that should not affect you to that capacity. It's
That do.
just,
That
it's
do.
you become almost like a ticking time bomb.
And we have one more to call out,
Mm-hmm.
but I just want to touch on this really quickly. That is a really important one to
Yeah.
recognize,
Mm-hmm.
because we are proud to say that we don't physically abuse our children.
Yes.
But I have read articles where special needs children, and again, this conversation about caregiving extends beyond children, but I'll just
Mm-hmm.
point out that special needs children are 3 times more subject to child abuse
Mm-hmm.
than non special needs children.
Wow.
And it's because of instances like this where
Mm-hmm.
the family is burnt out
Mm-hmm.
and something so small can happen
Yeah.
that the family loses control. And this is where it's really important
Mm-hmm.
to say, burnout is part of my role.
Yeah.
I will not be ashamed of it.
Mm-hmm.
I will recognize it, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge it,
Mm-hmm.
as you said,
Mm-hmm.
and manage it.
Keyword.
So what's one more signal
Um. So what did we say? Tired. Um. Different characteristics in that
in a
person's
behavior?
normal behavior. Um.
We said easily triggered.
Easily triggered. What's another one?
Yeah. I personally think that burnout is when you have lost interest in the
Mm,
things that you typically
love to do.
love to do.
Yeah.
And it kind of ties to what you were
Mm,
saying, but I think yours was more around just the empty tank.
yeah.
This is more you've lost interest in the things that make you happy,
Hmm.
right? You lose yourself.
Yeah.
You lose who you are authentically
Hmm.
because you have been so knee deep in
Hmm.
caregiving
Hmm.
that your priority when you wake up is not just your family, because that's everyone's
Yeah.
priority, their
Yeah.
family, but your priority is making sure that your child or your loved one has you constantly
Hmm.
around the clock,
Hmm.
and you
Hmm.
lose yourself to the point that you don't maybe communicate the same way that
Yeah.
you've done. You don't maybe have hobbies the same way that
Hmm.
you've had them. You don't maybe, read a book like you
Yeah.
used to. You lose yourself and you become so consumed in caregiving that the
Hmm.
burnout has essentially created an identity crisis.
Yeah. 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 I think that's real.
It's
Like
very real.
it's real, and it's funny because we're on this panel. We both live in the same house. We live in, and I never looked at it like that.
Yeah.
So just as one caregiver to another, just listening to you, I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
that's. I never looked at that aspect of you lose yourself, and I don't want to turn this into a man woman thing,
Mhm.
but men we're wired a little differently. So that aspect is like, okay, it's almost assumed that you get a family, you get a wife, you get kids. It's like you're gonna lose some of yourself. But I never looked at it from that aspect of something as simple as throughout my life, as long as I could read, I've always read at least 3 books a month.
Mhm.
I haven't read a book in 3 years.
Yeah,
That's burnout. Because burnout doesn't just happen overnight.
it doesn't.
It's a collective of things and build up and things, in the late nights and the early mornings and the doctor appointments and just trying to give your person as
All that
much
you
care
can.
that you can give them to
Yeah.
give them the sense of normalcy that you are physically capable of giving them, right? And it's things that pile up. But I never looked at it like, wow, you lose yourself.
You lose
So
yourself. And I think with
yeah,
any family dynamic, you
hmm
lose yourself. Anyone that decides to have a family,
yeah,
they sacrifice
yeah,
things when you don't have a
yeah,
family, right?
hmm
You don't get to go on
yeah,
those weekend
yeah,
getaways as much as you
yeah,
used to and things like that. So I think there's a, by default,
hmm
sacrifice
yeah,
that any family makes.
hmm
But it's a little different when you're a family caregiver because add on the additional pressure of making sure that that person is okay and that
hmm
person stays healthy and that person is getting their medication and that
hmm
person
yeah,
in their spontaneous moments
hmm
of having, chronic illness or whatever they're going through,
hmm
that you're managing that,
yeah,
the out of the blue visits to the ER and the ICU and the hospital visits and the surgeries.
yeah,
There's so much on top of that that
hmm
you tend to lose yourself. You have become a primary caregiver,
yeah,
and that has now trumped
everything
everything
else. Yeah.
else that
hmm
you are accustomed to, and that's real.
Yeah, and from my experience, like I said, I have two older sons from previous marriage, and until Layla came into my life, everything you just said,
Yeah.
and I'm a pretty compassionate person, but I never lived it. So until you live it, and you kind of have it as a part of your life, not saying you won't understand it, but it just hits a little different.
It hits a little
It
different.
hits a little different.
So let's get into how to manage it.
Okay.
I think we brought up this term about two or three times in a
hmm
conversation so far. Self care is
Yeah.
how I would start.
Okay.
So you said you used to read 3 books
hmm
and now you haven't read in 3 years.
hmm
Find that thing that makes you smile
Yeah.
and make time for it.
Yeah.
15 to 30 minutes a day for you
Yeah.
will not make or break your caregiving
Yes.
lifestyle.
Yes.
Trust me when I say that.
Yeah.
15 to 30 minutes a day
hmm
will not make or break your caregiving lifestyle.
Yeah.
It will help you
hmm
reboot.
hmm And just to tag team on that, like you said, 15-30 minutes is not going to break and cost you the Caregiver of the Year award.
Yeah.
It's really not. But what it is going to do is that 15-30 minutes where you have that peace of mind and you're kind of gaining your sanity back will go a lot further in your caregiving,
Yeah.
right? And it's almost like, because we've been there. I don't have time because I've had this conversation. Michael, I don't have time to do that. I have to do this, or you don't have time to do that. The key to this is you have to use your village.
You have to. Yes.
Whatever village, your village in whatever capacity that is. If that's another sibling, if that's a parent, if that's
A friend,
a
a
friend, if
neighbor.
that's a neighbor,
Yeah.
you have to use your village. Because what I learned in life is at 52 years old, no one can read my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So if no one can read my mind that I need help, how are they going to know that I need help?
I love that. Use your village. So
You
that's
have
the
to use your
second one.
village.
Use
Yeah.
your village and be okay to ask for help. I know for a
Yes.
long time that was my
Yeah.
nemesis because I don't like asking for help. I felt like asking for help was equivalent to being weak.
Yeah.
And I never wanted to show that, I am not strong enough for this challenge
Yeah.
that God has put upon me.
Yeah.
But asking for help does not make you weak.
Yeah. That's
In
so.
fact, it makes you strong. Sorry,
No,
I
no.
just want to say, in
Yeah.
fact, it makes you
Yeah. Yeah.
strong.
Yeah.
That was,
Yeah. No. Oh, what I was going to say was again, asking for help. That's a hard thing for a lot of people. And for you, you said, it exhibits weakness, or, in your mind, it shows weak. In my mind, I don't like people to tell me no.
yeah,
So I say, okay, I'm not going to ask for help because if I don't solicit help, you can never tell me no.
right.
But the reality of life is people are going to tell you no, and that's okay because everybody's lifing, whether they're a caregiver or not, whether they're a parent or not, whether they're a husband or wife or not, right? Everybody's lifing. So it's okay to say no, ask for help, and someone say no. But you'll be surprised of how many people
We'll
will
say
say
yes.
yes.
So true.
And
Yes.
what I've heard is, well, I didn't know you needed help.
Yeah.
And then in my off mind, I say, well, you should have read my mind. But the reality is, people cannot read your mind.
Well, let me
Yeah.
piggyback off of that too, because I think you make a good point. Some people will say, I didn't know you needed help,
Hmm.
but because I just said, like, you feel like you're weak if you ask
Yeah.
for help.
Hmm.
Some people don't want to offer help
Hmm.
because they don't want you to assume you look like you need help.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they will keep that to
Hmm.
themselves until you transparently come and
Yes.
say, I need help. And trust me when I say this, because we've done it.
Yep.
I would say you get more yeses
The nose.
than nos when you ask.
Transparency. That's the key. And at one time we lived in a society where everything was secret.
Yep.
Everything was secret. You don't want to know. People would be sick, and I'm just speaking from experience, where our great grandfathers, great grandma, they hid their sickness because they didn't want the family to worry and things like that. We are in a time where everything is transparent, even stuff you don't want to know about,
Even stuff you don't want
you
to know.
know about. So, with that being said, transparency is the key.
Yeah.
Because me as a giver, I can't give you if you don't show me that you're ready to receive.
Correct.
That's just the reality. That's just the law of nature. I can't give you if you're not willing to receive or ready to receive. Because again, I cannot read your mind.
Yes.
So asking for help, use your village. A
Self
lot of
care.
self care. A lot of times we don't want to use our village because it's like, I don't want that person thinking that we can't do it. Well, the reality of it is you can't do it by yourself. So utilize your village. That would be
Absolutely.
that's my advice. Use your
Absolutely.
village. When you use your village, you can maintain self care because now you have an older sibling that wants to help, but they don't know how to help. None of us was born knowing how to do this, right?
Yes.
But if you use your village, okay, I have a 12-year-old. Say I have a 12-year-old son, and he's playing video games anyway. Why can't that 12-year-old sit next to his or her sister, I mean his sister, and say, okay, I'm gonna sit here for 30 minutes. Mom, you go read a book.
Yeah.
Mom, you just go take a walk. Again, 15, 30 minutes is
Well,
not
if he
enough.
takes a walk, if she
Well,
takes a
not take a
walk,
walk.
he's too young to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
But I
you
know
know
what
what I
you
mean.
mean.
You
I
know what
know
I
what you
mean.
mean. Yes.
You know what
Yes.
I'm saying.
I know what you mean.
But it's just like we have to tap into that village because it takes a village to raise any type of child, whether
Yeah.
they need a constant caregiver or not. It takes a village
It
because
does.
life is lifing right now for
It does.
everyone.
So it takes a village. So the
Hmm.
last thought on this is not just the village that you know
Yeah,
personally, but also the exterior village.
yeah,
So a lot of people don't tap into the local resources that are available.
yes, yes.
Trust me when I say every state has some level of support and resource for
Hmm.
family
Yeah,
caregivers. Reach out to your local state resources and find out, is there a respite care program?
yeah.
Is there a summer camp program?
Hmm.
Is there a volunteer program that comes and helps you do things around the house?
Yeah,
Trust me when I say this, there is something that you can
yeah,
leverage to also help you in this journey.
yeah. Also, like you said, family support groups.
Yes.
Family support groups, what I'm learning, are extremely
Powerful.
powerful and
Mm-hmm.
important because you may meet a parent that's dealing with the exact same thing you're going through that have already gone through it,
Yeah.
who could just a 5 minute conversation would change your total perspective of the way you're viewing your current situation. Because
Absolutely.
like anything in life, when you're in it, when you're in the fire, you think there's no way out. But if you meet somebody who's been through the fire and now they're out, they can give you advice. They can give you guidance. They can give you an ear to listen to
Yeah.
or a voice to hear.
Sometimes we just
You know,
want to know that we're not alone.
and that's it. And
And
I
that in
think
itself could be
that is
gratifying.
so important. That is so important.
So let's summarize ways
Okay,
to manage self care.
self care.
Put yourself first.
Yep.
Find time for yourself.
Hmm.
Recognize, I like how you said it. You will not lose Caregiver of the Year award if you take 30 minutes to yourself every day.
That's, that's
You will not
totally
lose
agree.
it.
Yep.
Use your village,
Hmm.
your neighbor, your friend, your family, your other family, your children, your
Yeah.
other children.
Yeah.
Use your village.
Hmm.
Tap into your local resources. And don't forget, it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does not make you weak.
Yep. And again, like I said earlier, it's okay to have burnout. But as a caregiver, we can't live there.
We can't live there.
It's a temporary space.
But let's
Yeah.
let's remember,
Hmm.
we can't work it off either.
Yeah,
Burnout
yeah,
is part of our role.
yeah. Yeah.
It's not something that we can avoid.
Yeah. That's true.
So we have to learn to navigate through our caregiving journey
Hmm.
and manage burnout. So hopefully today it enlightened you around how some caregivers define burnout,
Hmm.
how burnout is not something that you can eliminate out of your life as a family caregiver, but instead there are ways that you can instill and install in your day-to-day routine that will help you manage the effects of burnout. And I also just want to point out before we close this episode, for those that are not personal family caregivers and those that are watching that have a personal relationship with a family caregiver, recognize the signs of burnout because 9 out of 10 times family caregivers will not fluidly express
Yeah.
that they're feeling burnout,
Hmm.
but recognize the signs like we've talked
Yeah.
about today.
Yeah.
And just recognizing it and having that conversation with the caregiver to say, I have recognized or what I think are signs of burnout.
Hmm.
Do you feel okay? Do you need help? Trust me when I say that goes miles
Yeah.
for family
Yeah.
caregivers.
I agree. I agree.
Again, thank you for joining us. This was episode 2 of Caregiving Unboxed. Episode 3 will be released in September. Don't forget, a new episode is released every third Monday of the month. Stay tuned.